Hey everybody, it's Anthony, and today I want to talk to you about a band. A band that stopped existing decades before I was born. A band that some say is the greatest band of all time. The Beatles. Now, some of you younger people might be saying, hey, wait a second, if they're the greatest band of all time, why aren't they still a band? Well, to that, a lot of people would say the answer is one lady, Yoko Ono. Now, I have no idea how true this is because, again, I wasn't there for it, but a lot of people, when you ask them, will tell you that Yoko Ono over here is the reason that the Beatles are no longer the Beatles. The reason that they broke up. They say that she came in, the Beatles had a great thing going, and then she came in, started dating John Lennon, and then she basically wiped out the Beatles like the comet that finished off the dinosaurs. Yes, the Beatles were the Fab Four, but it is acknowledged that the songwriting team of John Lennon and Paul McCartney were the leaders of the band, so they dictated the direction of the band and what songs they were going to record and stuff like that. But then Yoko Ono worked her magic on John Lennon. They were all into each other's hippy-dippy love, and then she wanted to take the band in different directions, and that caused tension among the Beatles, or so it's told. And that seems pretty hard to believe, right? Like, just one person can just come in and destroy the greatest band of all time? Shouldn't the greatest band of all time be stronger than just one person? But it did happen to the greatest band of all time, and if you can't really understand that because you're too young or for whatever reason, well, just think of it this way. People did come in, outsiders, and destroy the greatest movie franchise of all time. Thinking about that also got me thinking, who is the Yoko Ono of Star Wars? We all know that it's George Lucas's vision that brought this to life, mostly George Lucas, some other people helped him, but who are the outsiders that took their Star Destroyer and boarded his small ship unwillingly, forcing him to do what he didn't want to do? That's what we're going to talk about today.
Yes, yes.
The first candidate we have as to who the Star Wars Yoko is the obvious choice, none other than Kathleen Kennedy. Now, one word that I don't hear often associated with Kathleen Kennedy is a new word, so maybe that's why. Nepo baby. Yes, Kathleen Kennedy is somewhat of a Nepo baby. Her mother was involved in theater, and her father was a California judge, so that is probably where she got a lot of her money to produce lots of movies with. Kathleen started her career by co-founding a production company with Steven Spielberg and her husband, and that company would be called Amblin Entertainment. The movie that I associate with Amblin Entertainment the most is E.T., but she has produced quite a bit of stuff to her credit. There's the Back to the Future movies, there's Indiana Jones, there's The Land Before Time she did a couple of Studio Ghibli movies, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, so she has worked on a lot of very classic films. Now, normally, a person with a resume such as that of Kathleen Kennedy would be a very beloved figure in the world of cinema, but unfortunately, her recent actions has sort of sullied her name in the eyes of the public. A lot of her critics these days have called her a glorified coffee runner. I don't think we can really say that about her and be honest. I know you don't like her and you want to say some bad stuff about her, but that's probably not the truth. What probably is the truth, though, is this quote from Steven Spielberg where he said, "She was horrible at taking notes, but what she knew how to do was interrupt somebody." Not exactly doing her part to combat negative female stereotypes. Remember when watching one of those old movies and her name comes up on the screen like that in the beginning credits? Like, it gives me this feeling of like, oh, come on, man. I came here to have a good time. Now we all know the story, that George Lucas was no longer interested in making more Star Wars movies. He was old and tired, probably wanted to focus on, I don't know, something that didn't involve nerds. So then he decided to sell his company to a larger company, and one of the conditions was that Kathleen Kennedy be put in charge as the president of Lucasfilm. Not a great decision, in my opinion, but they went out to lunch, and she said yes to him on the spot. It was at that lunch where she probably ended up paying $50 just for a salad, where many fans would say that she eventually betrayed and murdered George Lucas. For you see, she promised to uphold the integrity of the franchise, the characters, and the overall essence of Star Wars. But we all know how that turned out.
The main thing is to protect these characters, make sure that they still continue to live in the way that you created them. and that the universe of Star Wars continues to grow.
Wow, Kathleen Kennedy sure did do what she said was important and protect the legacy of those Star Wars characters, didn't she? Luke Skywalker is more beloved now than he ever was before. Lando Calrissian is still a role model to black boys everywhere. Chewbacca wasn't at all reduced to a Disney animal sidekick like Flounder or Abu the monkey, and Leia Organa wasn't demoted from princess to general at all. You see, Kathleen made a promise to uphold the integrity of the characters that George Lucas had created. Unfortunately, it became apparent very early during her tenure that she actually had no interest in doing that, and she was much more interested in molding the franchise into her own image, much like an impatient deity, and making the franchise about issues that were important to her, basically. Using the franchise as a clandestine conduit to push the social changes that she would like to see. Now, there's nothing wrong with making movies like that if they're your own original ideas. If they're somebody else's ideas that have an existing fan base, the primary objective should be to cater to that fan base. Not only did Kathleen Kennedy not succeed in upholding the integrity of the characters George Lucas created, she didn't even succeed in upholding the integrity of the characters that were created under her watch. So, of course, many people would see Kathleen Kennedy's way of running Lucasfilm and then conclude that it's very clearly Yoko Ono behavior. She was not a part of the original vision, and then she came in and she started doing things her way. For example, Star Wars has always been for everyone. Anybody of any background can come in and watch a movie. I don't know why we push the narrative that they can't, but it was for everyone, and even though it was for everyone, we can just be honest and say that males gravitated towards this franchise more than females did. There's nothing wrong with that. We all like what we like, and it just so happens that guys tend to like action-oriented stuff more often than girls do, and the women Star Wars fans that I know would attest to that as well. But that's not good enough for Kathleen Kennedy here, because how dare something so popular be male-oriented? Now, Kathleen hasn't engaged in any particularly misandrous rhetoric herself, but she has used very pro-female-centric rhetoric, in addition to allowing her underlings to actively insult men and get away with it without any consequences, really. So that's why a lot of people are sort of not into the franchise as much as they were. Like the business prodigy that she is, she chose to quickly ignore the already existing fan base of a massive franchise and chose to refocus it and make it a girl brand by doing things like this picture right here showing up in these Forces female shirts, and also what she did was release a lot of books, memorabilia, programming, and focus it all towards women. Now, that wouldn't be a problem, necessarily. Nothing wrong with trying to bring new customers into a business, but when you ignore those old customers in favor of the new customers, well, that's when you tend to see the business start to fail. Why you're so hellbent on girls liking this franchise when you yourself refuse to like it, I don't know. In addition to the divisive direction that she's taking the franchise, she's also shown a lack of understanding as to why people like Star Wars in the first place. There was no plan to the Disney trilogy. The corporation just acquired the property and saw dollar signs in their eyes and just decided to just make whatever with whatever was lying around. Like, somebody probably put a towel on and that was Darth Vader's cape. I don't know. That would be very plausible, me just saying that. For example, it was Kathleen Kennedy here who gave the go-ahead to kill off Luke Skywalker, the franchise's main character and a very beloved hero. Back when Colin Trevorrow was in charge of doing the final movie in the trilogy, he kind of went like, "Da fuck?" And she was like, no, we're gonna do that because Rian Johnson wants to do that. And honestly, I don't think she made the desire to kill off Luke out of anything malicious. I think it was really just ineptitude. Like, I think she's the type of person that, like, during this era, it was, like, very, like, Game of Thrones and Walking Dead were very popular, and those shows were very notorious for just killing off characters, and I think she's just, like, the type of person where, like, Rian Johnson is like, oh, I want to kill off Luke Skywalker, and, like, she has, like, a little light bulb in her, just, like, yes, we should do that, just because, like, she can't think beyond terms of, like, oh, killing somebody off is entertainment. Now, you would think that if you didn't understand Star Wars, the smart thing to do would be to have lots of people around you that do understand Star Wars, so that you could make a good Star Wars product. But it seems like Kathleen is incapable of playing nice with other people who don't really gel with her leadership, as she's fired multiple directors on Star Wars projects. Colin Trevorrow, the team of Lord and Miller, Ryan Johnson hasn't gotten that trilogy that he was supposed to get yet. Even a woman like Patty Jenkins, which she's very pro-female, but I guess if she doesn't agree with Kathleen, you're out. It really shows her lack of planning skills, though, doesn't it? There have been several incidences since 2012 when Disney acquired Lucasfilm where Kathleen Kennedy's contract has expired and she's had the chance to walk away and let somebody else take the helm of Star Wars. Unfortunately, Kathleen refuses to retire, and the latest word is that she does not want to leave her position until she has a hit on her hands with this franchise. And to that I say, Kathleen, have fun working until you die. Our next candidate, Leslye Headland, who, quite notoriously, started her career as the personal assistant of Mr. Harvey Weinstein. Now, that doesn't make her necessarily guilty of any wrongdoing. However, she is getting a much better deal than everybody else does in this era. You see, we live in a time where a mere accusation could destroy your entire career, but Leslye here, she has a connection to somebody who's very clearly a monster. The guy was found guilty in a court of law, and yet she does not seem to suffer the same fate as other people. And that's a problem. I'm not saying she should be in trouble for anything, I am saying things need to be applied evenly across the board. We live in a time where it's not important at all whether or not you fall to the dark side. What's important is the appearance of whether or not you have fallen to the dark side. But anyway, after a career of helping Harvey stick his syphilitic mushroom dick into whatever actress he found delectable for the evening, Leslye moved on to making her own projects. She wrote a movie called Bachelorette, and she wrote another movie called Sleeping with Other People, which, I know it sounds like it, is not about Harvey Weinstein. She also co-created the series Russian Doll, which, if you're familiar with an actual Russian doll, is just crap inside of crap inside of crap. Her connection to Star Wars comes about from when she was hired to create a new Star Wars show that she called The Acolyte, a show that was very deliberately advertised as Star Wars in drag.
And yet people have told me that it's the gayest Star Wars, and I frankly...
You're offended?
Into it. No.
Now, while Leslye seems like the type of person who does not like white males because they're presumably just given things, Leslye had no problem giving her wife a role on The Acolyte, where she forced that wife to play a bald pickle. So, I guess, white men bad, but nepotism still good. Now, what could make her the Yoko Ono of Star Wars? Well, basically, she's doing the same thing that Kathleen Kennedy is doing, except Kathleen did it with women, and she's doing it for gay people. Leslye is, of course, a lesbian, and it seems like she's been trying her entire life to overcome the hardship and pain that she felt growing up in a very Christian household while struggling with her sexuality. If the stereotypes about being in that situation are true, she does have my sympathy. I do feel bad about that. The point where you lose my sympathy is when you decide to take out that pain and anger and frustration not on the people who deliberately caused it to you, but on the entire galaxy far, far away. We just got news that The Acolyte won't be renewed beyond the first season, so maybe Leslye can spend more time at home dealing with her issues. Next up, Michelle Redjuan, and I know a lot of you are saying, who? Basically, she's somebody who a couple of years back, she became a president, I think, of live action at Lucasfilm, and a lot of buzz was generated about her in the media. I actually don't want to say anything bad about her because I went to college with her brother and he's a pretty cool dude, so I'm hoping she's pretty cool as well. So why am I bringing her up? I just think it's weird that they made a huge thing about her and then she just kind of disappeared. Is she the Star Wars Yoko? I don't think so, but there she is. Out of all the people that we're going to be discussing today, I think she's possibly the least offensive of them all, so there are probably cool women working on Star Wars, and maybe she's one of them. But one person who definitely has caused harm to Star Wars, Ryan Johnson. Now, throughout the course of you getting to know me, you will see me very regularly bringing up how I hate the way that modern parents name their children. With all the Zimbos and Galadriels and whatever the fuck, these just names that you yourself would not want if you had them. Please don't do that, because if you do that, what you get is Rian Johnson. I have no evidence of this at all, but I firmly believe that the ridiculous way that Rian Johnson spells his name is what caused him to become the person he is. He was probably teased mercilessly way back in kindergarten for having the stupid spelling of the name Ryan that he has, and that caused him to be a whiny baby who needs to get revenge on society. And he did that by making his Star Wars movie. Not only does he have a dumb name, he also has a pretty dumb face. I mean, just look at it. He looks like a baby who tried to grow a beard. And not just like a regular baby, like that type of like toddler that just gets some sort of delight out of taking a shit on the floor and then having his poor mother clean it up as he giggles. His background is that he once saw the movie Annie Hall, a Woody Allen movie, and that's the movie that inspired him to become a film director or filmmaker. He does have some credits under his belt. He did the movie Looper. He directed a few episodes of the show Breaking Bad. And then he weaseled his way into Lucasfilm, where he made a Star Wars movie so bad it destroyed the greatest franchise in movie history. What's Yoko Ono about that? Well, he didn't want to make a movie for Star Wars fans to make them happy, because that would make sense. You know, making a movie for the people who are going to watch it. No, what he did was he made the movie that he wanted to make. He was even outright reminded by people such as Mark Hamill that you do have to consider that this is a franchise that has a history and you're supposed to make a movie to placate them, but Ryan was like, yeah, sorry. My vision is what's the most important.
Can I just say, though, a lot of times I would say to Ryan, we got to think about the fans. And he said, no, we got to think about the story and we got to think about our movie.
So instead of making a sci-fi fantasy movie where the big draw is action and adventure, Ryan made a movie that was all about lecturing you in the audience and pushing his political views onto you as the correct ones. And while I personally do agree with some of those views that he has, they have no place in a Star Wars movie. While J.J. Abrams also isn't that great because he also directed a terrible Star Wars movie, JJ did it by ripping off something good. So in that sense, you got a decent movie, it's just you can't really enjoy it because it's a ripoff. Now Ryan, on the other hand, ruined Star Wars by going in the exact opposite extreme, whereas he created a movie that contains stuff that has nothing to do with Star Wars. Also Ryan, considering that Netflix deal you got, kinda weird to make an anti-capitalist movie when you accept almost $500 million to make 2 fucking movies. Seriously, Netflix? Seriously? You expect to rake in over $500 million from the 2 movies that this guy made that I didn't watch but I would assume are probably mediocre at best? People who do acting as a side hustle will tell you that they used to make decent money until Netflix came along because Netflix doesn't really pay them too well. So why don't you maybe take that money that you gave him and give actual hardworking actors something to live off of? There's no way this guy is making you that much money. The guy's biggest inspiration is Woody Allen, so it's no wonder he has such a strong moral fiber.
I mean, it says right in the script, forget the past, kill it if you have to. You're doing a pretty good job.
I'm trying.
Next up is Dave Filoni. I actually don't have too much to say about him, except people thought he was going to be this savior that rode down on his boga lizard and just saved Obi-Wan Kenobi from General Grievous. I don't know, I never believed the hype with this guy. I'm not saying he's bad, I'm just saying, like, I don't get why people just believed in him so much. He's done some good stuff, probably. I mean, I personally didn't really like his Clone Wars show either, but, yeah, I don't know. I just thought that it made sense to bring him up in some way. Next up on the chopping block, it's Charmin Obaid Chinoy, whose name I'm probably not pronouncing properly. But anyway, Charmin here, she's a Pakistani woman who's all about female rights, and apparently she got so tired of the wonderful way that women were treated in Pakistan that she moved to North America to lecture men here on the way we treat women. She's a documentary filmmaker, and she's won multiple awards, as you can see, for making the type of movies that basically are only watched by stoned college kids who, because they've watched the movie, think they're better than you. The problem is that if you ever heard Charmine here speak, you'd walk away with the impression that she really likes the smell of her own farts. And what's Yoko Ono about her is that she came into a position that she really didn't earn. Now, all of us true Star Wars fans know that Rey Skywalker is the most popular Star Wars character of all time. That's why all her action figures sold out very quickly, and why dozens and dozens, probably millions of little girls on Halloween dressed up as Rey. So with the indisputable success of Rey as a character, it does make sense to bring that character back for a whole new saga, and who better than Charmine here to direct that saga? I mean, she's never actually directed a narrative-driven movie before, she's only done documentaries, but, you know, why not put her in charge of billions of dollars that they wouldn't give anybody else in past decades? To be fair to her, she did make a movie called A Girl in the River, a documentary that supposedly changed a law in Pakistan that stops the horrible practice of honor killings within that society. And that is a major accomplishment. The issue is that does not make you a good filmmaker. At least not a good filmmaker as far as coming up with the story and interesting characters and knowing all about sci-fi and all the rules and lore of that world. As if the activism wasn't bad enough, the other issue that's kind of coupled with it is that Charmine has made no attempt to hide the fact that she's using filmmaking as a way of pushing her own bigotries. Charmine obeyed her husband and cooked a nice dinner over here, has outright stated that she doesn't like men. Well, not necessarily that she doesn't like them, but she does want to make them squirm.
I like to make men uncomfortable. I enjoy making men uncomfortable.
And all of us should be upset that somebody with outright bigoted views has been promoted in society and uplifted instead of being pushed to the sides like they deserve to be. Look, we all say things that we don't necessarily mean. Maybe these statements are not necessarily reflective of the way that Charmine feels inside, but they can be interpreted as statements that are bigoted, and it's a little messed up that she gets to say stuff that gets interpreted as being bigoted, and then other people who say things that get interpreted as being bigoted just get tossed to the wayside just with very little misdemeanor to their name, such as the way Gina Carano did.
It is important to be able to look into the eyes of a man and say, I am here, and recognize that. And recognize that I am working to bring something that makes you uncomfortable, and it should make you uncomfortable because you need to change your attitude.
Next up, Marcia Lucas, ex-wife of George Lucas and editor of the original Star Wars movie. There's been a lot of slander against Marcia Lucas, like even on the DVD of the original Star Wars trilogy, the first DVD release, there was a documentary feature in there that kind of portrayed her as this gold digger who wanted half of George Lucas's money after she divorced him and nothing more. I don't recall it ever even mentioning that she worked on the movie, so there's that. That documentary made me not really trust Marcia for a long time, because that's all I really knew about her, what I was told. They made her seem like somebody who took George's ad in the divorce and forced him to drive around an old beat-up pod racer. But in recent years, it's come to light that she may have been one of the people that's responsible for Star Wars' major success. Maybe even the person that made Star Wars what it is today by saving it in the edit. Because if you've seen the footage of the original edit, it's not great. It's very, keeps Star Wars as a B sci-fi movie, and her edit made it something, epic. Did she take things over too great? I mean, I guess you could say that, sure, but I don't think that she's done anything Yoko Ono-like, personally. But that brings us to our final candidate now, Melody Hobson, who's George Lucas's current wife. Now, Melody is actually a very accomplished person in her own right. She's a businesswoman. She's rose through the ranks of a Chicago investment firm. I think that was her first business venture. She started at the bottom, worked her way to a very high position. She's been on the boards of some very successful businesses, Chase Bank included. She's also had some success on camera even. She had a segment on the show Good Morning America, and then I think it led to her own show for a brief period on ABC, where I think she discussed business or something like that. She's currently the chair at Starbucks, where she helps millions of Americans every day get that sweet cup of coffee that stops them from going Rambo at the office for just one more day. She met George Lucas around the time that Revenge of the Sith hit theaters. I don't know how they met. Maybe he walked into a Starbucks and ordered a tall latte with blue milk. How does all this make her the Yoko of Star Wars? Well, I guess there's that obvious romantic angle there. It's George Lucas's creation. She sort of came into it. You see, George Lucas is a creative person, and Melody over here is a business person. And while those people can come together and enjoy life and have all sorts of wonderful experiences together, when that happens, when businesses come into creative endeavors, the creation very frequently suffers. The way the media tells it, it was actually Melody here who encouraged George to sell off Star Wars to Disney, or not Disney specifically, just any sort of corporation that will have it, because that's really how business people think. They just think in terms of profits and that sort of thing. It really isn't fair, though, to pin all the blame on Melody here, because to be honest, it's probably the way George Lucas was feeling inside already. He was dealing with a lot of shitty fans that were being nasty to him, telling him things like, oh, you ruined my childhood, Jar Jar licked my balls, but not in a good way, and I just don't think he just had it in him anymore. I think just he was tired of all that making him feel bad, and also just, even if it wasn't really making him feel bad, I just don't think he wanted his day-to-day life to be so Star Wars involved. Some of you who are familiar with George Lucas probably know that he's very liberal and lefty in his beliefs, and those people have a history of being very anti-corporate, so it is a little weird in the first place that he was in charge of his own corporation, Lucasfilm, but then to just go off and sell his corporation to a bigger corporation, it just doesn't seem like him. I mean, it kind of makes sense, because what are you going to do? But maybe he would have ended up making that specific decision to sell the franchise without any external pushing that Melody is supposedly responsible for. But in any case at all, it's just like, why? Why would you sell something so beloved and also, I guess, profitable, if you want to look at it from that way? Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just retain ownership of the franchise itself so that you can call the shots to some degree? And you could just, since you're a filmmaker, just maybe look into the other filmmakers that you love, like your friend Steven Spielberg, or a younger generation, and have them make the movies if you just feel like you're out of gas and you don't want to make those movies yourself. It just doesn't really make sense to me to go that other route.
All those Star Wars films.
All the Star Wars films.
They were your kids.
Yeah, well, they are. I loved them. I created them. I'm very intimately involved in them, and obviously to
And
sell
you
them
sold
off,
them.
I sold them to the white slavers that take these things and
Is Melody the Star Wars Yoko? I wouldn't necessarily say that, but I do see an alternate timeline. If she, in fact, is the one responsible for George selling the franchise, I do see an alternate timeline where he was not persuaded to do that, and we have other Star Wars movies made by people who actually love Star Wars. By all means, when you're upset with the direction the franchise is going in, please, voice your opinion, but do it in a way that's respectful and doesn't make the person hate themselves, because this is where they end up. But anyway, those are just a few of the names that are responsible for ruining the greatest franchise in movie history. Who do you think is the worst one? Let me know down below. Please leave a comment, a like, a subscribe. If you're going to comment, please leave a respectful comment towards me and the other commenters. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you again, and may the Force be with you.
Why do people who have the power to have freedom, turn it over to somebody who's going to take it all away from them? Those people who may not play by the rules because they're selfish and greedy turn themselves into evil people who don't care about other people.
There you go.